Hello and welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, joined by my co-host, Matt Giraldi.
What's going on, guys?
And today we're going to be coming at you with some preseason trade targets. So some guys that might have been drafted, in a high spot or in a lower spot than they should be going and could possibly be good players either for your bench or possibly for your starting lineups. Maybe talk through best ways to trade. We each have somebody that we think that you can inquire about before the season. Maybe you won't be able to get a trade for a couple of these guys, but if you inquire now, you'll have a better chance if they perform out of the gate slowly. So the first guy we're going to talk about here, obviously it's going to be one that might not be easy to get, right? Somebody that was probably a first round pick in your SuperFlex leagues, and that's Patrick Mahomes. I would say though that this is one of the ones I was just referring to about inquiring early, because I do think that he's going to get off to a slow start. He did last year against Detroit in the first week, right? They lost that game. Mahomes didn't particularly play well, even though maybe it was more of Kadarius Toney's fault. But I think that there's a little bit of this that's going to be happening this year too, right? They play on in prime time, first game of the season, Thursday night, and they're going to be going up against a really good Baltimore team. And so there's a chance without Hollywood, and Xavier Worthy is going to be a rookie, right? First game in the NFL, maybe some jitters or something, maybe not fully ready to take on a huge workload. And so he'll have Rice and Kelsey. They'll have Pacheco out of the backfield. Their offense should still operate pretty well, but I could see a situation where Mahomes goes for, 15, 14, something like that in week one. And people might be looking around going like, oh no, that's not good. And say in Superflex you drafted like a Caleb Williams and he pops off in week one, or, if depending on how you feel about CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson, right, those guys go off in week one, and you're able to pair somebody from lower on your lineup, like a flex guy or an RB2, to one of those quarterbacks to go up and get Mahomes. I think that's going to end up being worth it as the season goes on, and maybe even you can go a little bit further down in the quarterbacks, right? If you go like quarterback, and you ended up with like Jordan Love as your number 2, Brock Purdy is your number 2, and one of those guys is going off through the first couple of weeks, there are some owners that might panic and take on another possible starter if they start 0-1, 0-2 with Mahomes. So that's the first guy that I would inquire about and see if you can get on one of your teammates or on one of your league mates about Patrick Mahomes.
I think there's a little bit of sour grapes with folks from last year, the way that Mahomes performed. But you and I both are in the camp that adding Hollywood and Worthy and Rice likely not getting suspended this year, the offense is eventually going to be humming. So yeah, inquire now, and just cross your fingers that maybe Pacheco scores a couple on the ground or something on Thursday night.
Yeah, no, totally agree. With the Pacheco possibly carrying more of the workload in that first week on the ground. And I do think with Mahomes is that some owners are just not going to be willing to trade him because he was their first pick or just because he's Patrick Mahomes. But I do want to highlight that, because if you can ask now, and if you're in a one quarterback league, there's even an even bigger chance that you'd be able to get him, especially if Mahomes is like a 4th or 5th round pick in your league. There's definitely going to be an opportunity there as well to go up and try and trade for him. All right, so the second guy we're going to talk about here, second quarterback. So we're actually, I didn't do this at the top, but we're going to have 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 receivers. The second quarterback we're going to talk about is Justin Herbert.
Yeah, so as you guys probably know by now, Trevor and I are both Chargers fans, as you can see by the jerseys hanging behind us. Herbert last year obviously got hurt, which was very unfortunate, but he was still QB 10 in fantasy points per game, assuming you remove Joe Flacco, who started like 4 or 5 games last year. He's QB 11 in 2022, QB 2 in 2021. So he's the type of player from a talent perspective, like we know his ceiling is sky high. And Chargers this year projected to win 8.5 games. So this isn't going to be some dominant team that's, leading at every half and they're just running the ball down the throats of the opponent like Harbaugh did at Michigan. And, looking at the new OC they brought in, Greg Roman, again, they want to pound the ball, but, he was the OC in Baltimore when Lamar was QB1. And I'm not calling Herbert a QB1 this year, but I think he does let his QB run a little bit. And I think one of the most underrated aspects of Herbert's game is how good he can be as a runner. Looking beyond that, with the offensive line, vastly improved with the addition of Joe Alt. So there's a lot of things that are kind of working in, Herbert's positive direction. And where he was drafted this year was so much later than we're used to seeing. So I think he's a guy, especially in Superflex, that I would be having my eye on and having that conversation right now as someone who in our league, really waited on quarterback. Maybe if Geno pops off week 1 and you kind of hype up that new Seattle offense, package him and another player and try to trade up for Justin Herbert.
Yeah. I think with Herbert too, in one quarterback leagues, he likely wasn't even getting drafted, right? And there's some super flex leagues where he went as QB 18, QB 19. He's going down with Aaron Rodgers. He's going down with Kirk Cousins, like in that area, or even below that. Matt Stafford, Deshaun Watson. There's a chance that he got drafted in your Superflex league down at that area. And if you're not playing with Charger fans, like I don't have a league where he went that late. I have a lot of Charger fans in my league. Nobody is buying that he's going to be QB 19. But if somebody ended up with him that thinks he's going to be down there, this is somebody that you could trade for right now. Go ask about him, because I do think, like you said, they're not just going to be able to run. Even if they're more run heavy, which we know they're going to be, the offense is going to be good. He's going to have protection. And we all know that Herbert has a very, very, very good quarterback in terms of accuracy and being able to throw the ball down the field. So with more time, I do think that they have a chance to be more explosive on the offense than they were last year. And, last year he got hurt, like you said. Last year they had Mike Williams hurt. Keenan Allen at the end of the year, not exactly healthy. So I do think that there's more upside than anybody's really giving him credit for here. All right, so the next player we're going to talk about is a running back. This guy has been moving up both of our rankings quite a bit. I did not get enough of him in draft season, and I'm regretting it now. So this is probably my number 1 trade target. And again, somebody that you might be able to get on the cheap before the season starts, because he might have been drafted down at running back 30. And I'm talking about Javonte Williams. He played 75% of the snaps with the starters in the preseason. He looked really good. Sean Payton loves to throw the ball to the running back. So even though Jaleel McLaughlin is going to have the main passing down role, he's going to have the downfield running back role within this Denver offense. I do think on early downs, there is going to be an opportunity for Javonte to get a lot of targets. And I do think Bo Nix is a very good quarterback to enact that game plan, right? I mean, he's somebody that isn't super mobile, and it can be looking for the running backs, look for the running backs in Oregon when he played there. And so I think that there's a chance here that Javonte ends up stepping up in a big way, impresses Peyton, and, ends up with a major role, like a 15 touch per game type of role. And, he might not score a lot of touchdowns, but for the price that you're going to pay for him, if he is going to be priced at RB30, I would definitely try and, for example, package like Tony Pollard with maybe a bench receiver for him if somebody's willing to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree. We were down on Javonte all off season. I think there was just such a crowded backfield, and now we're kind of seeing it play out like you mentioned in the preseason. And along with Sean Payton, Bo Nix is afraid to throw the ball more than 5 yards. Sometimes it seems like. So I think he's just going to be a check down hero to him. And let's not lose sight of the fact that Javonte is a really good running back too. I mean, obviously he was very good his first year, and then, the injury kind of riddled things, and last year Denver was a mess, but he's someone I'm definitely going to be inquiring about. And I got 1 draft left, so maybe targeting him in a PPR league.
Yeah. I think if you still have your draft, definitely look into Javonte as you start to fill out your starting roster, because I have him pushed up now over Raheem Mostert. I have him at running back 22, and I think that he's just been going too low all offseason. I think the initial camp news scared people off him. I know it scared me. I have him in a dynasty league, and I've been trying to move him all offseason, and now I'm starting to think like, wait, maybe I got lucky. Nobody accepted my offers. I might have something here. So I'm getting a little more excited for him in that league as well. The second running back we're going to talk about here is Jonathon Brooks.
Yeah, so with Brooks, at least looking at our league, he went in round 12 of Superflex League around guys like Devin Singletary, Javonte Williams, Brian Robinson. I think a big part of Brooks and your ability to trade for someone like this is whether or not you have IR spots. If you're a league that doesn't have IR spots and Brooks is taking up valuable bench space, I think that might be an easier person to target. But even if you do have IR spots, let's say someone took Brooks instead of a starter like Singletary, and they're all confident going into week 1, and all of a sudden their 0 RB approach looks like it's falling flat on its face. You've got a guy that you can start and trade Brooks for. I think he's someone that down the stretch, I would expect really big things with him. We saw the way Dave Canales rode Rachaad White last year to RB7. He was Tampa Bay's 3-down workhorse. Jonathon Brooks profiles as a workhorse. I think Jonathon Brooks is a lot more talented than Rachaad White. I think he's one of those guys that if you can get on your team and be patient with him, it will pay off dividends because, obviously fantasy is all about the stretch run. You need to get into the playoffs, but once you're in the playoffs, you need studs to carry to a championship. And I think this is one of those guys that could potentially do that for teams.
Yeah, and I think additionally with Brooks, if you have Chuba Hubbard, do what you can to get Brooks on your team, because I think if you're in a position even where you have to start Chuba, but you're able to bring in Brooks, so you have a Raheem Mostert, you have a Devin Singletary, you have a Jerome Ford, I don't know, there's a lot of running backs kind of in that area. You have a Jalen Warren and a Najee Harris, maybe not Najee, right? But like if you can trade any of that range of players with somebody to get Brooks. Or if you can even, like, this is maybe one of the situations too where I would be fine trading even a higher player and getting an additional wide receiver, and you put Brooks on your IR spot, so it is really just a 1-for-1 on your active roster to start the year. I think that that's something that I'd be more willing to do, especially if I have Chuba Hubbard. If I have to trade a starter, I'm able to move Chuba into my starting lineup until Brooks is healthy, and then I just replace that spot with Brooks once he's back. I think that that's a viable strategy at this point. Maybe add somebody to your bench that's better than you have. You're right, like upgrade an additional bench spot and trade, take the 2 players. And that's not something I normally do. But I think in this situation, there's a lot of upside for Brooks over the second half of the year. And if you're trading a good player that, you should be able to pair Chuba and Brooks together to have to also have a very good starter the whole year. All right. So the first wide receiver we're going to get into here is JSN. And this is not somebody that I targeted in drafts hardly at all. So I'm as surprised as anybody to be hearing about JSN for maybe the first time on this channel in its entirety. I don't think I even put JSN in our top 40 wide receiver preview. So this is somebody that, again, is a bench target. But I do think that if you can get him before the season starts, I didn't necessarily like him because I felt like he was getting pushed into like the 11th round or 10th round sometimes of SuperFlex leagues. So like into the 7th, 8th round of your redraft or of your 1 quarterback leagues. And that just felt a little rich for my blood because I'm still not entirely sure that he's going to be taking over from Tyler Lockett. That just kind of assumes to me that Tyler Lockett's going to be taking a back seat. But at this point, I do think that, if he did go, like, say, in the 11th round of your draft, or he went later than expected, as kind of the second or third bench player on somebody's team, I think he's a great target at this point, because if he is the number 2 wide receiver, that's going to be a valuable position in the Seattle offense. I think they're going to be much better. He's going into his second year. He could have one of those big sophomore steps up like we've been seeing from a lot of wide receivers lately. He was the first wide receiver taken in the draft last year, so he has the talent. And I think that there's a possibility anyways that you could try and trade one of your bench guys, and like maybe you got in on the Bengals defense or the Seahawks defense, one of those top defenses for week 1. And you just say, hey, look, like you have some week 1 upside, get off to a hot start. We'll swap bench guys. And, maybe that's something you could do. Again, maybe you add a kicker. Maybe you have somebody's handcuff. Maybe you add a Jordan Mason and you add him with the McCaffrey owner who also has JSN, P. Ryan, same thing. So I think there are some possible options to get JSN onto your roster.
I think the way that they utilized him last year was very disappointing. It was just those kind of little dink and dunks, which isn't really his game, but I think you mentioned with the new system coming in, I think that's going to be a big boost. I mean, we saw, I expect Jason to step into that number 2 role, but we saw at Washington, where their new OC was last year, their ability to support 3 very good wide receivers. And he's kind of stepping into a similar role as he was with the Huskies. I mean, when you look at Geno Smith, he throws a good deep ball, same with Michael Penix. I see a lot of potential similarities in this offense, not to mention Jason reminds me a lot of McMillan. But I would expect them to utilize him a lot more because, like you said, he was the number 1 wide receiver off the board last year. Obviously, this year's class was much different. But yeah, I would definitely be targeting him, and I am a little upset I haven't got him in really any drafts either. But expect good things from him this year.
Yeah, and he was used close to the line of scrimmage at the beginning of last year. You saw it in the game even Drew Lock started, right? Dude, let's go. The touchdown to beat the Eagles, dude, where Locke went up over the top. That was the JSN. That was like a 25-yard bomb, and he caught it 6 or 7 yards. Yeah, in the rain, 6 or 7 yards deep in the end zone up the sideline. Like, he is not just a behind the line of scrimmage, just a slot receiver. Yeah. He is very much talented on the outside. He's not a burner, right? But like, I don't think that is super critical to being successful because he has the ability as a route runner to get open. And I think he can also still get deep because of, corners being afraid of getting burned on slants or on comeback routes and stuff from him.
And one thing we didn't mention too is last year he started the season with like a broken hand. So as difficult it is to acclimate into an offense as a rookie, it's a lot more difficult when you're missing time and then you still have an injury. So I think for him, all these signs are really pointing in the right direction for year 2.
All right, the last guy that we're going to talk about here is Brian Thomas Jr. We've talked about him a lot, so this is bear with us. If you're listening to us for the first time, we love us some Brian Thomas Jr. So if you don't have him on your roster, he's going to be our last trade target here for this video.
We love Brian Thomas Jr. and there's not many people that are built like Brian Thomas Jr. His combination of size, speed. I mean, the camp reports that no one can even keep up with him on the field. We saw his ability to blow defenses over at LSU last year, scoring like 17 touchdowns. They lost Calvin Ridley. They lost Zay Jones. But I think the biggest thing that we saw in the preseason was he was on the field for 2 wide receiver sets. So in my opinion, they're looking at this guy who, was a first-round pick, and they're saying, how are we going to keep this guy off the field? I watched all of his preseason routes and targets, and he only got a few catches, but his routes look good. He looks strong. He looked fast. I really think this is the type of guy when you're looking for upside, that if he turns into Trevor Lawrence's number 1 target, say what you want about Lawrence, but he's not afraid to throw the deep ball and air it out. I think this guy can pay dividends. So I would be inquiring about him week 1. I know they're playing, or before week 1, I know they're playing Buffalo, but if he isn't on the field as much as maybe we expect, maybe it's the Evan Ingram show and someone's not starting Brian Thomas Jr., he's someone I would definitely ask about again after week 1 and see if you can get him an even a bigger discount.
Yeah, I agree. And as week 1 rankings come out, like, he's a rookie, right? He's going to be ranked way down the board. It's not like he's Marvin Harrison. So, he's going to be ranked probably in the mid 30s on weekly rankings. So, maybe you can play to that a little bit in your trade talks and say, look, like, he's a bench guy, when really he has the upside this year to be a starter too, and so also, just another vote of confidence from him. He comes from wide receiver U, he comes from LSU. So, that school produces wide receivers in today's age of football better than anybody. So if you're worried about the route running, right? Because he did a lot of deep ball running, I don't think he's going to struggle as much with the route running as people have been saying.
I think Ohio State would like a word with wide receiver U, but maybe that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, topic for the offseason, maybe. That would be fun.
There you
go over LSU versus Ohio State wide receivers and the success that they've seen over the last 10 years, maybe.
Let's do it.
Back to Odell. We got to make sure we include Odell in the LSU part of that discussion. So, all right, and with that, appreciate you guys for watching. If you haven't yet liked and subscribed, if you guys are watching this for the first time, kind of getting into the swing of fantasy football again, as we are very, very close to the start of the season, we'd appreciate that. And hope to see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching.
Later.